What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scales 13. Today's video is going to be about my leopard geckos bioactive enclosures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how my leopard geckos have been doing, and I'm also going to show you a couple changes that I made to make the maintenance on the bioactive closures just a little bit easier on myself. And of course, we're going to show you some things that have changed over time. Since this is a bioactive enclosure, of course the enclosure setup isn't going to stay the same all the time. So here you go. Here's an update on Gex and Tim's bioactive enclosures. What's up, Tim? Guys, so to start off with, I'm just going to show you each leopard gecko as I go through the enclosures and explain to you what I've actually done in the past couple of months, what I've been changing around, and how the geckos are actually doing in their new environments. Now first we're going to look at Tiny Tim here, which is my big normal leopard gecko. Both of my leopard geckos are males. This one is a little younger than my bell albino. But let's get a look at how this little guy's looking up. Looks like you got a little cleanup crew beetle behind you. That's perfectly fine. All right, buddy, come here. Let me just get a look at you. Yep, good boy. All right, buddy, let's bring you a little closer so we can get a look at you. What's up, man? You guys see he's quite large. He's a pretty big leopard gecko. Yeah, big guy. But if you look at this guy, look at his hips. He's not too fat. Look at his eyes. Let me bring his eyes closer to the camera here. Eyes are nice and clear. Doesn't have any problems. Let's look at the other side. Oop, excuse me, bud. Sorry. Okay, let me see if he'll look up at the camera. So you guys can see he has also a perfectly clear eye, no problems. So yeah, these guys are looking pretty healthy. And they look like they're doing just fine. All right, guys. So to start off with, we're gonna talk about the plants. So as you guys can see right here, I still have this cactus in Tiny Tim's enclosure. And this one was thriving, doing great, didn't have any issues. Now, unfortunately, the cactus that was in this corner here, that was in Gex's enclosure, didn't do well and I had to take it out. It sucks, but hey, what are you gonna do? It's a plant, you can always replace them. And I'm still getting used to this, guys. Like I said, this is my first fully bioactive enclosure. And the thing is, I'm just getting used to doing the maintenance and getting used to keeping these succulents alive. I don't actually keep very many succulents in any of the plants that I have in my own house. So this is something new that I'm getting used to. I didn't really water it much and things like that. And I don't think that overwatering is what killed it. That's usually what kills succulents, but overall that one just didn't do well. I mean, I watered it at the exact same time as this one over here. And like I said, this one's looking perfectly fine. This one hasn't had any problems at all. But fortunately, the other one just didn't make it. But I did replace that cactus with this cool little guy I have over here in the back. Now, I forgot the name of this plant as well, but this one's been doing pretty good. I gotta find the name of it. If I do, I'll have it appear on screen while the video is rolling here. But this plant's been doing really well. I've had this plant for about 2 months now, and the leaves have been doing well. It hasn't been shriveling up. I've been watering it at the same rate that I water my other succulents that I have in the enclosure, which is usually only about once a month, and they seem to be doing just fine. Even with all this lighting and of course added heat and everything else, the enclosure does stay pretty dry, which is what I want. I don't want this enclosure to become too moist, but I did spray down my enclosure this morning, which is why if you look, the humidity is a little higher than what it normally is. Usually I keep it around 40, and right now the humidity is about 60%. Yeah, so it's about 60% right now in that enclosure. And in this enclosure, let's see, it's about 51%. So that might have to do with the actual humidity for the spot of where I have those hygrometers placed. But either way, I know that'll dry out in about a day, and it'll still go down to about 40–45% humidity, which is the range I usually try to keep in these enclosures for the air humidity. The reason I keep the humidity that low is basically because, of course, leopard geckos are an arid species. You don't want them to be in a very humid environment. If the environment is high humidity, let's say like my blue-tongued skinks enclosure over here, then those guys can actually develop respiratory problems from the excess humidity. Another plant that's doing pretty well in the enclosure is this little Haworthia over here, commonly known as a zebra aloe. Finally, I remembered the name of a plant. Now, this little plant right here has actually been doing pretty well. It hasn't really grown much since I put it in the enclosure, but it's been surviving. It didn't shrivel up. It didn't get beat up by my leopard geckos, which is pretty much all I want from the very beginning. It can grow as slow as it wants, as long as it survives. That's all that really matters to me. And so far, these 3 plants have been doing pretty well. I don't really plan on adding any more plants in the near future, but yeah, these guys right here are doing pretty good. So as far as the plants go, I'm doing pretty good with plant maintenance right now. Yeah, I've lost 1 or 2, but I replaced them with a couple other ones, and the new ones that I replaced them with seem to be doing just fine. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Another thing you guys may notice is I changed the water bowls in both of my leopard geckos enclosures. Here's the reason why. So those large water bowls really made it a pain in the neck when it came to changing the water, because of course they were awkwardly shaped, and of course placed in the back where I had plants and all this different decor around, I'd really knock a lot of stuff over, and I actually had a potential issue where I'd wind up bumping into the plants, and I don't want to wind up beating up my plants by having such a large water bowl. Now granted, those big water bowls that I had were good as far as holding a large amount of water for a longer period of time. But at the same time, these little water bowls make it easier for me to do my maintenance. Now, as long as I'm home, I can change these out on a daily basis. They're easy to clean, easy to grab out of the enclosure without knocking stuff over. So that's the reason I decided to replace them with these. Now, if I ever decide to go away on vacation or something like that, I can always put those bigger water bowls, which I still have, back in the enclosure just to make sure that my leopard geckos have enough water to get them through the duration of time that I am not home. But while I'm home and while I'm just doing my daily maintenance, I'm just gonna leave these little water bowls in here, and they're doing just fine with these. There's really no reason to have such a large amount of water in there all the time if you're going to be replacing it for your leopard geckos on a daily basis. And I also think it makes the enclosure look better. And because the thing is, those big water bowls that I had, although the bottom of them did have kind of like this brown looking plastic to it where it tried to mimic a rock, that big reservoir they have was kind of an eyesore. So I do think these are a better choice as far as aesthetics for the enclosure. And this is what I plan to keep as my standard for the future. Let's see how Gex is doing. All right, buddy, let's see how you're doing over here in your enclosure. Okay, well, your moss stayed pretty tucked in. Maybe not so much. Got some dirt in here. But let's just get a look, see how you're doing, buddy. Come here, man. I just want to get a look at you. Look at the camera. So here's Gex, my bell albino leopard gecko. And I just want to show you guys how he's looking right now. So if you look at him right now, he's not too fat. Hips are looking pretty good. Let's see. Looks like he may have been eating a little excess calcium because he is starting to get those bubbles. So I'm just gonna take his calcium bowl out for a little while and see if those go down. Okay, so let's get a look at his eyes. So if you look at Gex's eyes, which he has those bell albino eyes, which look really, really cool, which are gray with a lot of those pink little vein lines in there. His eyes look really nice and clean right now, no problems. And if you look at the other eye, yeah, this one you can see a little better with the lighting. I could shine light right into his eyes so that way you guys could see it, but that's gonna be counterproductive because he's gonna close his eyes right away, and I don't wanna make our little guy uncomfortable. That's just a kind of a bad idea. So I'm just gonna show you guys the best way I possibly can. Now, Gex is looking pretty good. Good boy. Alrighty. So as you can see, both of my leopard geckos are doing just fine in the enclosure, and their sheds have been coming out just fine. I haven't had any issues with these guys as far as impaction or anything to my knowledge. Also, here's another cool thing. So both of these leopard geckos are males, and the thing about male leopard geckos is they tend to have their femoral pores get clogged when they're in an environment that doesn't have enough natural rough textures, so that way when they produce those oils out of their pores, they can kind of remove it and scrape it on things to get it off. And since I've put them in here, if you look at the bottom of my leopard geckos, come here Gex, I just want to show them for a second. Oh, sorry bud. So if you look, there's no blockages down there. And I used to have an issue where these guys would get blockages sometime. Now granted, of course, the standard for that is, you know, obviously, first of all, if it looks really bad, take them to the vet. But of course, some people will soak them. A little bit extra moisture can help. You can always add a nice humid hide and different things like that to the enclosure when you have that. Adding some rough textures help, but I decided just to go fully bioactive, so that way they would have plenty of rough surfaces everywhere, and I'd have a substrate in there that can hold a little bit of humidity, just so that way these guys can have an environment that really supports them as far as their natural functions and keep those femoral pores from getting clogged in the first place, rather than worry about just being able to dislodge them all the time when something occurs. Now I know you guys are probably wondering, well, since you're using a natural substrate for these guys instead of carpet or some type of flat hard surface, what are you feeding them, and do they catch their food easily? Well, when it comes to me feeding them their mealworms or superworms, I like to use these stones here as the feeding place, where I'll drop the mealworm in front of the gecko on the stone, and the gecko will snatch right off the stone, just to make sure that the animal's not ingesting any substrate that it shouldn't be. Also, another thing I like to use is dubia roaches. Like I said, they're one of my favorite feeders to use personally. And what I'll do is I'll tongue feed them these dubia roaches, just to make sure that these guys aren't swallowing anything they're not supposed to as well. But so far so good. It's been a few months, and these guys seem to be doing well in their newly designed enclosures quite nicely. Well everyone, I hope everyone liked this video. It was really fun for me to make, and I hope you guys really like to enjoy my leopard geckos. These two guys have been with me for quite a while now, and I really enjoy these guys. So I hope everyone has a great day. Peace.